Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing great. In today's class, we're going to talk about the band descriptors. But what are the band descriptors? As far as I know, a lot of you beautiful people are struggling with getting the score that you're in need of when it comes to the writing of the IELTS spot. So in today's class, we're going to talk about different kinds of parameters, different kinds of factors that affect your writing score. Because if you want to upgrade your level, if you want to just boost your score, you need to be familiar with different kinds of elements which are important, and the examiner takes them into account when they are correcting and scoring your paper. So in today's class, we are going to have everything from the examiner point of view so that you will understand what kind of mistakes you should be avoiding and what kind of essential activities and tasks you'll have to refer to in order to be able to upgrade your level. So if you agree, if you are really energetic about this, let's get it started. There are 4 elements which are very important in your score. So to be honest with you, your score is going to be divided into 4 parts, and we are going to talk about each of them in detail. So let's see. The first one is about task achievement. Task achievement is related to the ability that one shows when it comes to answering the question or questions. Because sometimes the question has 2 parts. Sometimes it has 3 parts. Sometimes you need to answer double questions. Sometimes you need to talk about advantages and disadvantages. So if you do not answer to the point and if you do not cover all parts of the questions, this part will affect your score negatively. What I'm saying is that in order to achieve a high band score, you need to be so attentive to the question or questions and try to answer them as fully expanded as you possibly can. The other point about this is that the number of words that you are required to write on. So the first thing is about writing task 1, because in today's class, we're going to focus on the first part of your writing, whether you are a candidate of general or you want to just go for academic part. This will apply to both of you. The next thing is about coherence and cohesion, because you should write so smoothly that the reader will understand what exactly you wanted to say. I always tell my students that you should write, for example, the academic report in a way that the examiner or the reader will be able to follow your report without taking a look at the visual instruction. So without having it in front of them, they should be able to see what exactly you are referring to, what are the most important parameters or trends that you are talking about. The comparison should be vividly seen out there. The similarity, the difference, everything should be written, and that kind of categorizing and just grouping is very important, because it will make it much more clear for the reader to follow what you meant. And for letter, exactly the same story goes on. The kind of logic that you are using and you're writing your letter is based on will determine your score in that regard. So as a reader, I should be able to start reading your letter. I should understand why exactly you're writing that. What are different kinds of bullet points, different kinds of questions that you are getting back to. And I should understand to whom you are writing because of the tone, because of the kind of literature and structures that you are intending to use. The next item is about lexical resource, which is a very luxurious name for vocabulary. So depends on the kind of structure, depends on the kind of letter, for example, you're willing to write. The choice of your words, the choice of phrases that you are using would vary. So if you are writing a letter to your bestie, definitely the kind of phrases or collocations that you are referring to would be completely different from a time that you are referring to your boss. So it is about vocabulary. The same story goes on for academic students as well. So if you want to go for a report, you need to level up your vocabulary range as well. So you need to show that you've got all the things that are required. For example, if you're talking about increasing something, you shouldn't use increase all the time, 10 times. You should have different kinds of alternatives to show off your great range of vocabulary so that the examiner will make sure that you are in a good place and you are on the right spot, and you definitely deserve a high band score. And the range is very important. Of course, the accuracy is important as well, because you should understand what kind of words should be used out there. It is very important as well. So the appropriacy, the things that are important to be used, or sometimes I see that some students prefer to go for acronyms. For example, instead of saying does not, they would go for doesn't, or isn't, or don't. You should remember that for academic report, you should have that kind of tendency towards the formal tone. So instead of using those kind of acronyms or let's say abbreviations, you would go for the complete version, the full version. You would go for do not, does not, is not, like that. And the last item that we want to talk about is grammar, because of course grammar is a very important part and element, because you need to show off your range of grammatical points, whether you are writing a letter or whether you are writing a report. You need to go for a wide variety of structures and grammatical points. You should use your creativity in a very intelligent way to show off that you know everything that is needed to show your ability and strengths as a high band achiever. Okay, so let's get started and see what each of them means in detail. Task achievement. A band 7 task achievement says that you need to cover the requirements of the task. Imagine that the task wants you to cover 3 bullet points, or wants you, for example, to go for that report based on the visual illustration given to you. So you need to go for all parts. If even one of them is absent in your work, this part, task achievement, will be negatively affected. For academic students, we need a clear overview of main trends, differences, or stages. So it's very important. Writing an overview is very important. You can write it after the introductory part, or you can have it at the end of your work. But the most important thing to be remembered is the presence of that. If you are intended to get a high band score, it has to be there, whether in the beginning or at the end. It doesn't make a big deal, but the presence is important. And the next item is about present a clear purpose with the tone consistent and appropriate. If you are a general training candidate, you need to have a clear purpose. So we said that for academic students, overview is very important, and the same story is true for the general training students, because they need to show a clear purpose. Why are you writing that letter? It has to be written out there. And of course, the tone has to be consistent and appropriate. You should always ask and double check yourself whether you are writing to the point or not. If you are writing to your friend, the tone has to be informal. But if you're writing to one of your managers, the tone has to be formal. So every now and again, try to double check this kind of stuff. The next item clearly presents and highlights key features and bullet points, but could be more fully extended. So in order to be awarded a beautiful 7, you need to clearly present and highlight key features. So it is about academic candidates have to present and highlight, stress the key features, okay, the most important things. You're not going to talk about all the details, because that way you will run out of time and you will write more than 300 words. That is not our focus, of course. And for general training candidates, you need to cover bullet points, but you could have done it, for example, in a much more extended way in order to get a band 8 or higher. So as a candidate who can get 7 in this regard, you need to cover all the bullet points. Let's see what are the differences between task achievements of a person whose score is 6 and 7 that we already talked about. So addresses the requirements of the task. So when you get 6, you've already answered all the parts of the task. So because sometimes students think that, for example, getting a 6 means that you haven't covered all parts, but that is not true. You have already covered all the parts. It is not, showing that you have forgotten anything special. For academic students, we see that they present an overview with information appropriately selected. So in order to get 6, you need to have an overview. Otherwise, you will be downgraded to 5. And for general training candidates, we need to see a purpose that is generally clear. There may be inconsistencies in tone. So for candidates who are intending to go for general training, we see that kind of purpose, but there are some inconsistencies in tone. Sometimes you're using formal tone, sometimes you forget whom you're writing to, and you're using informal tone. So these kind of inconsistencies will result in 6. Instead of 7. Present and adequately highlight key features, bullet points, but details may be irrelevant, inappropriate, and inaccurate. So it is saying that the key features are adequately highlighted. The bullet points are covered, but the details may be irrelevant, inappropriate, and inaccurate. So sometimes you're just talking about something which is not asked. Sometimes you are just changing the information because of lack of accuracy. So all of them will result in your score to be a 6. Okay, guys, so let's continue our discussion with the next item, which is coherence and cohesion. Coherence and cohesion, which simply means the kind of ability that you are giving your reader to have in order to read your work very fluently and smoothly. So in order to get band 7 in this regard, you need to logically organize information and ideas, and there should be a clear progression throughout. So it means that when I start reading your work, I should understand which point I am starting from and what are different kinds of elements, what are different kinds of trends, for example, in Task 1 academic report, and how can you help me just go forward and see the other points throughout the way till the last point, which is the end of your writing report or letter. So in order to do that, you've got different kinds of devices, like a range of cohesive devices that if you need to get a band 7, you need to use them appropriately, although there may be some under or overuse. So it is saying that sometimes students try to overuse these kind of cohesive devices. For example, every sentence starts with a kind of cohesive device, which is not natural. Even in your first language, you wouldn't do that, would you? You would use those kind of cohesive devices, linking words like although, like while, whereas. These things, whenever they've got a function. Someone who I do not remember the name said once that if you can omit the linking device and nothing seems to be absent there, it means that their use is not natural. And that makes sense. Imagine that I just want to take out although from this sentence. The meaning wouldn't be complete. So it means that the use of although in this sentence is fundamentally necessary. But sometimes in order to show off your knowledge, some students try to overuse these kind of linking devices. So you have to remember the fact that not only overusing them will not bring you any benefits, but also this very kind activity will result in having your score downgraded. So remember to use these kind of linking devices whenever they've got a function to go for. The next item is about a person who can get band 6. So if you can arrange information and ideas coherently, and there is a clear overall progression, it means that you've got your 6 reserved. So what I'm saying is that a candidate who can get 6 in this part can already arrange information and ideas coherently. So I can understand, I can read your text very smoothly and that everything is okay. The overall progression is out there. So everything is prepared for me as a reader, but it is not as coherent as the previous one. Use cohesive devices effectively, but cohesion within an orbit between sentences may be faulty or mechanical. As we said, sometimes students try to enforce the use of linking devices, which will result in your failure to get a band 7, and you will be able to get band 6 instead. So you shouldn't sound mechanical. It's very important because the examiners are fully trained to understand whether you are just using those kind of linking devices naturally or not. And they will just spend something like 5 minutes to correct your paper. And if they feel that you're just trying to enforce the use of something like linking device, your score will be negatively affected. And that is a fact. And they will just understand it within a second. The next item is about the use of referencing. It's very important because I see that a lot in your writing and your reports or maybe your letters as well. So you're talking about those kind of trends, and all the time you're just referring back to the names. You say that the use of coffee, the use of coffee, the use of coffee. Okay, instead of just having it repeated, try to go for referencing, using something like this, using something like it, because referencing is one of the most important elements that will help you get a band 7. But if you fail to do so, your score will be at band 6. The next item that makes up your score is about lexical resource. As I told you previously, it simply relates to your vocabulary use. A person who can get 7 can use a sufficient range of vocabulary to allow some flexibility and precision. So it means that this person, the author, is trying to use a wide variety of vocabulary. Imagine the topic is about different kinds of, requests that you are having from one of your colleagues. So we can see different kinds of words, different kinds of phrases, collocations, which are appropriate for that kind of task, that kind of topic. We call them topical words or phrases. Use less common lexical items with some awareness of style and collocation. For getting a band 7, the use of collocation and less common lexical items is a must. If you fail to do so, your score will be downgraded to 6, and that is a fact. And when we say less common lexical items, it doesn't mean that you need to go for some archaic or bizarre, strange words. Not at all. They're just less common. For example, instead of going for something like get, you would go for acquire or obtain. That is it. So that is a less common lexical item. May produce occasional errors in word choice, spelling, and or word formation. So that is not all the time, very, occasional. And that is very important because when you want to get your score as 7, you need to understand the fact that your word formation, the part of speech that you are using, should be mostly correct. What about lexical resource at band 6? A person who can get 6 in this regard can use an adequate range of vocabulary for the task. So even though you have used the vocabulary at a great range, you can get 6 because it is adequate. Okay, it is not a wide variety of. Can you understand? Can you distinguish different kinds of, meanings or kind of implications that each of these items that we are working on mean? So it means that you are already using that kind of vocabulary and it seems to be adequate, but it is not a wide variety, and that makes you to be stuck at 6. And attempt to use a less common vocabulary, but with some inaccuracy. So even though you're trying to implement and employ some less common vocabulary, you might get 6 at this very important part, because there are some inaccuracies. And as far as there are some inconsistencies in your vocabulary choice, you will get 6. And make some errors in spellings and or word formation, but they do not impede communication. That is very important, because there are some errors in spelling or word formation part of speech, but if there are a lot, that will make you a band 5 in this aspect. But as far as there are some mistakes, but I can keep continuing your, report or your letter, and I can read, I can understand what you mean, you can get 6. But if the number of mistakes is a lot, that will cause you to even jump down to a band 5, and that is very important. And the next item and the last item that we want to talk about is about grammatical range and accuracy. You've got that kind of opportunity. You should seize it. You should go for the use of a variety of complex structures. But when we say complex structures, it does not really mean complex. It means just long sentences. When you use something like although, despite this, unlike that, whereas, while, these kind of linking devices and subordinating conjunctions will make your sentence already a complex one. Or when you use relative clauses, which, where, that, these are all complex sentences. Or even conditional sentences, all of them are complex structures. I will make another video telling you about complex structures and different ways with the help of which you can form and make different kinds of complex structures, so that you will use and employ more complex structures in your writing very naturally. Produce frequent error-free sentences. This is very important because a band 7 and not only tries to use complex structures, but also the majority of sentences are error-free. So if you've got some problems with verb and subject and verb agreement, or if you forget that kind of S for plural noun, it means that you haven't achieved a band 7. Because a person who can get a 7 in this respect usually does not have any major problems. That's why we see produces frequent error-free sentences. And the last item is about has good control of grammar and punctuation, but may make a few errors. So there are still some problems, but they do not make you just, stop. You can continue reading without any specific problems. And it shows that this person has a great control over this very particular thing. But what about a band 6 holder? So this person uses a mix of simple and complex sentence forms. So we've got a wide variety of simple and complex sentences, but the majority of sentences tend to be simple rather than complex. So if you're using more complex sentences compared with simple sentences, your score will go for 7. But if the use of simple form sentences will outweigh the kind of complex sentences, your score will be stuck at 6. Make some errors in grammar and punctuation, but they rarely reduce communication. So that is very important, because you are having some problems with grammar or punctuation, but this does not impede or block the reader, and the reader can still understand what exactly you mean and keep continuing reading. That's it. Okay, guys, thank you for your participation. Today's class is over, and I will make the same video explaining task 2 because, as you might know, it is really important and it will make up 2 times more than the first task. So please make sure that you subscribe to this channel, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Love you guys. Take care.